Hello and welcome back. And have you seen the price of hard drives and RAM these days? It's absolutely extortionate. So much so that a number of you that have chose 2026 to be the year that you move away from cloud and onto your own on-prem data storage solution have been slightly worried about the old spend, which brings us to the subject of today's video. I'm comparing two remarkably affordable NAS solutions. This is the UNAS 4 from Ubiquiti in the UniFi range of solutions, rocking out at $379. And this is the Ugreen DH4300 Plus, another 4-bay solution that's arriving around $399 depending on where you shop around and promos and stuff like that. Now, both of them you can probably afford if you're already paying 2 to 4 terabytes of online cloud storage. A subscription cost for that much data on a cloud service is actually more than just buying one of these two outright. It doesn't include your storage, but a lot of you are trying to make the jump away from that subscription service onto your own data. So let's talk about them. Which one of these best deserves your money and your data? Now, it'd be so easy to just say, that one's cheaper, go for that one, because they're so similar. Because these are really similar solutions. They're both turnkey NAS solutions. That is when your hardware and your software is combined in a single package to be ready to go out the gate. Indeed, both of them arrive with an internal eMMC area of storage where the operating system lives. So it will run straight out the gate anyway. They're both arriving with 4 SATA bays of storage. That means that you can populate it with a single drive and then just add drives later if you choose, and then combine them for up to 1 disk of failover in a RAID 5 environment. On top of that, they both arrive with an ARM CPU inside and DDR4 memory, neither of which allow for upgrades. We'll come back around to that in a moment. They're both 2.5 gig network solutions. They've both got USB storage there. They both arrive with file managers. They both arrive with remote access protocol. They both arrive with very similar architecture, and they can both be synchronized with cloud services. So regardless, even though they are very similarly priced, with the UniFi solution arriving, depending on where you shop around, to $30 to $40 cheaper, it has to be said that money-wise, a lot of you are going to have your heads turned by the UniFi. However, let's break down into that value point, because they both arrive with an ARM or ARM processor, an A55 architecture CPU for that matter. However, this arrives with the A55, the UniFi there, and 4 gig of LPDDR4 memory. The Ugreen actually features technically 2 ARM processors. They list it on their website as an 8-core processor, but it's actually an A76 and an A55 processor, 2 quad-core processors, and also bring into the fold 8 gig of LPDDR4X memory. Ignore the X. Ultimately, in this comparison, it comes down to 2 times as many cores and twice as much memory on the Ugreen solution there. So how does the UniFi UNAS 4 counter this point? Well, as mentioned, these systems arrive with 4 hard drive bays each. However, in the case of the UniFi, it arrives with 4 hard drive bays and 2 M.2 NVMe bays there. That's right, this is technically a 6-bay solution, allowing you to have the 4 hard drive bays in the RAID configuration of your choice, but also 2 SSDs for caching. That's read and write caching, which for those that aren't aware means that when you are uploading data, the data will be uploaded onto the faster SSDs to receive the data quicker, and then afterwards it migrates it over to the slower hard drives, and then more frequently accessed files will be copied over to the SSDs, although these will be much smaller files, but these will be copied over to the SSDs for faster retrieval later. These are things that are not available on the Ugreen system unless you populate some of the hard drive bays with SATA SSDs, which would really funnel down and heavily reduce your storage capability. Also, the UNAS software, UniFi drive, there's been a lot of talk in the background about M.2 NVMe applications on this, and it would not surprise me if down the road those M.2s become usable as storage pools. That means you'll be able to utilize them for both caching but also faster general storage. That is something that's not ever going to be available on the Ugreen. It is a pie in the sky in the future, but still nonetheless, for hardware profiling, that is going to be desirable. On top of that, this system arrives with PoE deployment, Power over Ethernet deployment, or PoE+++, at around 90 watts. Now, it also arrives with a mains power output, but if you're running a Power over Ethernet network switches, and it will have to be PoE+++ because of the draw that hard drives have, this can be deployed via a single cable for both network and data, which makes it very convenient to set up in those harder to reach locations which may only have a single mains output, and therefore you funnel a lot of surveillance cameras and more out of a PoE switch. But we have to also be realistic. A lot of you are not going to like the idea of a PoE solution. So there'll be those of you, particularly those in a UniFi network, we'll come back around to that later, that are really going to like the convenience and integration of that portfolio. But the Ugreen arrives with separate network data and power input, a standard barrel input there. The result is that you've got your data flow going up and down, and they're both 2.5 gigabit networking, by the way, which is more than easy enough to saturate with 4 hard drives for that matter. But in the event, for example, of the UNAS, if that was connected to a PoE switch and that PoE switch fails, or that PoE switch has a software update and restarts, that will impact the UniFi system. Now, if you deploy this in a UniFi network, the UniFi switch will integrate with the system. But if you're not using a UniFi switch, that may be a problem for you and force unexpected reboots of the system when you might not want it to happen. But what about their design? It has to be said that these two brands have gone a very different way in terms of physical design. In the case of the UniFi system, you may have noticed there's almost nothing on the sides. We have a USB Type-C port there on the front, which can be used for storage, and alongside that we have got an LCD panel giving us real-time information about our device. It isn't touchscreen, and a ventilation panel here on the rear, but it's on the base where all the hard drives are equipped. So as you can see here, we have 4 hard drive bays, each one of them click and load out, they're not lockable, and at the top we've got IOS M.2 bays, and there tucked inside is our 2.5 gig PoE port there. Normally these have got black caps on them, but I've swapped these M2s out for another video I'm working on, but these are normally black here at the top. And the whole thing utilises a vertical cooling system running through with a vent there at the top. Now, things are definitely different and arguably more conventional on the Ugreen side of things, because on this we have got our 4 slots there built in, and this is on a larger base fan there at the bottom. It's a more square design rather than the more rectangular design of the UniFi system, which by the way is also available in white. But this system here, all the air funnels through to the bottom, but there's also ventilation on that top mounted panel there. There's also further ventilation there on the sides. That all adds up to the Ugreen system probably allowing for a lot more air pass out than you find on the UniFi, but we'll come back round to temps and noise later on. But alongside there on the front, also featuring a USB Type-C 5 gig input, just like the UniFi, this system also arrives with further USB Type-A 5 gig network ports and an HDMI output there, which allows you to control it utilizing the mobile or desktop application to output media to your connected TV or monitor. Ultimately, I think most users would agree the port and connectivity is better on the whole on the Ugreen system rather than the UniFi. The UniFi, and we'll come back round to this, is centralizing itself on network storage. It is very much its USP. There are going to be users, and I know because I've just talked with you in the comments and on Reddit, that have commonly said you can't compare the UniFi systems against other NASes because these have a different profile. UniFi have a different intention for this device. Realistically though, people are comparing them. You, for example, watching this video because you're looking at what you can get for your money and ultimately what your priorities are for your local storage system, which is bringing us right the way round, by the way, to the software, which is a huge difference between these two devices. The UniFi system is, by its very design, UX, UI, name it all you will, a UniFi product. It integrates much better into an existing UniFi network, your Dream Machine, your switches, whatever. It doesn't totally integrate, for example, not running their surveillance platform Protect, but it does integrate better, allowing for that centralized management and alerts behind a UniFi wall there. The Ugreen system, on the other hand, it's designed to be standalone within any other network. Ugreen does have a portfolio of devices, some comparatively rudimentary network switches as well, but this is designed to work on its own. And although you can use it in a UniFi network, accessing it remotely, you'll have to use something like Tailscale or Zero Tier, or you want to use their own remote access relay services, you're going to be utilizing its own way, which once you integrate it into your UniFi network will create multiple doors, and for some that's not going to be a pleasant experience. It's not going to be difficult, but some people like the unity of a UniFi experience. That said, this device has just got more apps. It's got a more fully featured client application for managing it on your iOS device, your Android device, or desktop client device, like, again, your Mac or your Windows environment. But also it has a container application for you to run Jellyfin, run Docker applications of Plex, Smart Home, and more. It has multimedia apps. It has a lot more featured applications and services than the singular vision into storage that is the UniFi solution. So you really have to decide how you want this system to scale out and what you want it to do in its lifespan in your network. But what about the reality of having one of these in your home or business environment? Noise, temperatures, and power draw. Well, I'll get the easiest one out of the way. In terms of temperatures, it was very, very similar. Despite their different attitude towards profiling and cooling ventilation, the temps across them, with similar access testing in my previous reviews, which you've seen online, is largely the same, with temperatures sitting probably as low as 36, 38, and then going into the very early 40s in the external chassis. And they're both using plastic chassis, by the way, after 24 hours of constant hourly access. Now, what about power draw and what about noise? I would say in terms of noise, in the three measurement scenarios that I went for, low, medium and high, because both of them arrive with the means to scale up the fans and scale down as needed, I will say that the UniFi system was quieter when the fans are at their lowest and when the fans are at auto. However, when you ramp both of these fans to the maximum, which is something that would normally only happen automatically when the systems are under heavy use, the Ugreen was the quieter of the two. Again, it's really going to come down to how and where you deploy these solutions, and also the storage media you choose to use. Now, talking of the storage media that you choose to use, it's worth remembering that the hard drives or SSDs you use will impact power draw, noise, and temps on these. The bigger, more bold hard drives, like recently released 30 and 32 terabyte hard drives, they get hotter, they make a lot more noise in terms of operation, and they have a larger power draw. However, in a like-for-like scenario, I deployed both of these systems with no hard drives, no SSDs inside, just connected with 2.5 gig and monitored the idle power to give you some idea what the baseline was. And between these two, the Ugreen was definitely the lower power consuming. It went as low as 4 to 5 watts with no storage media installed inside there, whereas the UNAS system went only down to about 10 to 12 watts, peaking around 14 watts when I was trying to ping the device. Because remember, both of them run without storage media inside if you choose, so we could get that baseline. And then after that, you're going to have to add between 4 to 10 watts for each individual hard drive or SSD, or not SSDs, but just hard drives that you install. As I mentioned earlier, the UniFi system is designed around existing in a UniFi network. It is at its best, although you don't need to run it behind a UniFi wall. You don't even need to connect it to UI services. You can run the whole thing on the LAN if you choose. It is still nonetheless at its best when it's leaning onto a UniFi network. The UniFi endpoint services and remote access protocol, the UniFi network monitoring, it just does better within that network. The Ugreen system is more multi-purpose, and although you can run it in that UniFi network, as I mentioned earlier, it can run better outside of a UniFi network. In most scenarios, when the UNAS 4 outside of a UniFi network will feel quite limiting. It focused towards storage is unparalleled, and actually feels quite refreshing in 2026 when some NAS brands are trying to do a lot. But the utility and the long-term scalability of the Ugreen's features, apps and services is certainly going to make it appealing. Ultimately, it costs a little bit more, but it has a higher glass ceiling and a higher capability. But if you don't care about bells and whistles beyond storage and you just wanted cloud that you could deploy in your house affordably, the UNAS 4 is a great solution for that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please use the links in the description to get hold of your NAS. Doing so will help us here at the channel. It is just me and Ed doing this, and the guides, the videos, the reviews, the free support forum, the works, it all costs money to run. So using the links in the description results in a small commission which costs you nothing extra, but we get, and it allows us to keep doing what we do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.